Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers. We just wrapped up the third straight day in pads out here, Irvine, California, Saints training camp, and things got a little intense today, a little chippy out there. It's the third straight day of going up against the same people. Head coach Dennis Allen said that is to be expected. It just can't have effect on the execution.
Yeah, look, third day in a row in pads, so I thought, practice was a little bit chippy today, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think our guys are competing, and I think the execution, overall was as good as we needed it to be today, but, that's kind of to be expected a little bit throughout training camp. You're going to have some of these days, and so how do we respond? We'll have a day off tomorrow. How do we respond and come back and have a good practice on Friday? I still think we got some things accomplished. I just don't think it was quite as clean as what I would have liked for it to be today. But look, we'll go back and look at the tape and see what it ultimately looked like.
With the pads coming on for the first time on Monday, the practice times have increased a little bit day by day. Today was the longest practice that the Saints have had the entire training camp, going 2.5 hours, which added a little additional time to work with. The Saints used the extra time for a few extra team sessions. They had 4 and then an additional 5th at the end where some of the younger players were able to get in to get some more reps.
We've incorporated a little bit more of what I'm calling the developmental period. So there's only so many reps that go, in training camp. A lot of those reps are going to the 1s and the 2s. And so some of the guys are on the 3s, aren't quite getting as many reps. And so this is an opportunity at the end of practice for them to get, 10 to 12 good, solid reps. And develop some of these young players.
Some quick notes from practice, things that stood out before we get to today's guest. I will have to say the wide receiver defensive back drills, they go one-on-one once the pads come on. It is a real battle, and that's something that you always want to keep an eye on. Today's reps, it was Alontae Taylor going up against Chris Olave, and Alontae forced 3 PBUs. Chris Olave only got 1 catch on him, so that was really impressive. Good to see Taylor flash in that drill. And then later on in team drills, he actually had what would have been a sack on Derek Carr. So he was really flying around today. Would say that it was his best day by far, and maybe the most standout performance by any of the cornerbacks so far this training camp. Speaking of Chris Olave, he was a full participant in practice after leaving early in yesterday's practice with what DA called a hip injury. On the injury front, it was good to see running back Kendre Miller and cornerback Marshawn Lattimore on the field, at least taking practice in. They did not participate at all. They weren't dressed or doing any work, but they were watching. So it was good to see them again. And then doing work on the side with trainers was tight end Juwan Johnson and defensive lineman Brian Brzee. Hopefully Brzee will be able to return soon, and that's great to see Juwan Johnson running around after his off-season surgery. Hopefully he'll be able to make his return sooner rather than later as well. During that last session of team drills, quarterback Spencer Rattler did connect with wide receiver Mason Tipton on a extremely deep route. Rattler has that arm strength, so getting that connection with the speedy Tipton was fun to watch as well. With the pads coming on, that's when you start getting a better idea of how things are really looking in the trenches. And because of that, I was lucky enough to track down Jermon Bushrod, who is here on hand doing some analyst work for Fox 8. He gave me his breakdown of how things are going with the offensive line, the defensive line, and the Saints team in general. Jermon, thank you for joining us on the New Orleans Saints podcast. It's great to have you out here. You've taken in 3 practices now. How much are you enjoying being out here?
Well, of course, let me state the obvious. The weather's great. It feels good to be out here, not a cloud in the sky. So that's kind of refreshing. I know it's kind of refreshing for these coaches and players as well. But what I'm seeing is I see a rejuvenated team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You see a lot of guys that are buying in, that are excited about the new operation that they have here, the new leadership, new coaching staff. So I'm excited to see how it all kind of works out. Unfortunately, I only get 3 practices in person, but I'll be able to, really keep up with you guys via social media and obviously at the game, seeing how they're being able to take it from the practice field to the game field. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence that you showed up when the pads came on, being a former tackle here.
Yeah, listen, I can see these guys run around in shorts and T-shirt all the time. When they put those pads on, that's when it gets exciting. That's when you start to see what type of team you're going to have. How competitive is this team being? And I see some competition. You hear the trash talk. There's been a couple scuffles here and there, and that's kind of what you got to see. You have to see that. That means these guys are out here working. It just can't get to the point where it becomes a distraction or somebody gets hurt doing something stupid. So, really at the end of the day, they keep that competition, keep that fire, keep that, that fiery attitude that they have, and come together and let's see what happens this season.
I mean, you've been in it in the trenches. When you're going day in and day out against your own teammates, how awkward does it get when you get back to the hotel and you're hanging out with these guys?
Hey, it's at least they're not hitting each other in the heat right now, And at the end of the day, like that's training camp. You're going to battle against those guys. You're going to compete. You're going to hit them. You're going to be frustrated. And usually when you have after practice events or activities like fighting, usually it does come from the guys in the trenches, but you see that coming from our receivers and the DBs. So what's that telling me? That these guys are really competing, they're really getting after it, and sometimes it doesn't even matter if it's hot out here or not. When you're competing against somebody over and over and over, it gets a little testy. But I've enjoyed my 3 days being out here. It's exciting. It's always good to be around this organization and obviously you all in the media.
You mentioned the rejuvenation that there's been on the offensive side with the new offensive coordinator and Clint Kubiak. With his system, how much does that change responsibilities for the line and what the line is being asked to do?
Well, listen, over the league, offenses pretty much are the same. Really, what's different is the philosophy behind the offensive coordinator, what they believe in, what they're going to hang their hat on. You know what you're going to get out of Kubiak. You're going to get the outside zone. You're going to try to get your running backs out in screens. You're not going to have a bunch of drop backs, which is very O-line friendly. And you're going to have some play action. But what does that all stem off of? Running the game, being consistent, running the ball, being consistent, and calling those plays and doing our job up front. Because if you run the ball 10 times and we're only getting 2.5 yards a carry, that doesn't really give the confidence that the OC needs to continue to keep dialing those runs up. So it's important that, this group comes together early on in training camp, and I believe over the first 3 days I've seen that, especially out the first group.
Definitely searching for some players to take steps forward with Trevor Penning, especially moving positions from being on the left side to now on the right side. And then you have Taliese Fuaga, who played his entire collegiate career on the right side and moves to the left. How difficult is that to make that change?
Well, you're talking to somebody who made that change going into the 10th year of their career. So it's a difficult transition. And I went from left side to right side, outside to inside, from tackle to guard. And that was quite a transition. These guys are young, so my body was kind of stuck in ways that I've been doing, consistent technique and repetitions over the years. But these guys are young. They're smart. They wouldn't be a part of this team if they weren't smart. So, they have the confidence that these guys can go in and alter their technique and understand what it's going to take, one, for them to be on the field. And that's really, at the end of the day, for a guy like Penning. He's had a little bit of a tough sledding on that left side, but he was getting a little bit better from all the film work that I was able to do before coming out here. I saw somebody that was taking some strides, and let's just hope that he takes the proper strides on the right side of the line. And, when you got this, your number one pick, him going from right to left, he seems like he's grasping it well just from the 3 days that I've been out here. He's going to have some growing pains. Listen, you get to go up against Granderson, who's been is coming off his best year and looks like he's going to have another good year. You have Chase Young. You got to deal with Cam Jordan from time to time. So he's going to have his hands full, but it's going to be a crash course, and a crash course that I think he's going to be okay. I see somebody on film who has a game plan when he goes into the game, talking about Taliesin. Is that how you pronounce it, right? Taliesin, I'm sorry. So that looks – I see a guy who's patient, who's strong. He's got a good anchor. Those are good traits to have in the offensive line, especially at that tackle position. So I feel like he's going to be just fine.
You mentioned the line and who they're going to have to go up against. It's been fun to watch some of these defensive ends, and they're getting after it. They seem quick. They've talked about implementing a NASCAR package where you get all 4 DNs on the line. What have you seen from maybe where they're at now, but kind of expectations for them this year?
Well, you have, when your DNs are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 280 pounds plus, it makes your defensive coordinator, your defensive line coach feel good from taking these guys from outside in, because at the end of the day, it's all about length, hands, and working edges. So what I found to be interesting is the 7th day of practice, 2nd day of third down work, and they're already breaking out the dime package. They're already breaking out, the linebackers up on the line. You didn't have DeMario Davis today, but Pete Werner was out there, and you can see the pick stunts and the pressure that they've been able to provide this team last season or the last couple of seasons. They're already doing it out here. When you see those types of fronts in the offense, you game plan for that. But when you bring it out here during practice, you just got to communicate and understand what you're seeing and rely on your technique. And I feel like on this day of practice, offense started out pretty good. I like the way they came out, run the ball, but as the passes started to go, you could start to see the exotic looks from the defense, and it started to confuse those guys, and you started to see some pressure on the quarterback. So, that's why you're in training camp. It's good versus good, and you can go back and you can reevaluate and make those corrections moving forward.
You mentioned the run game. Alvin Kamara, 30 years old, just had his birthday last week. Yeah. He still looks like he's got it out there, moving extremely well. What are you expecting from him in this new offense?
Alvin looks good. Alvin looks good right now. It's a testament to him, one, for not making this contract issue that he's having with the team more of a bigger issue. He's here. He's getting the work in. He doesn't have to play catch-up whenever they do get it done. So that's encouraging. That's the type of things you want to see out your leader. But this offense really molds Alvin, or it really fits his skill set, Like you were saying, he looks explosive. In his outside zone, he already runs very smooth anyway, but in outside zone is one cut. When you make that one cut, you got to go vertical. And I think it plays into exactly who Alvin is. And he's going to be able to catch the ball coming out the backfield. And I've seen a couple screens today that looked really good. So, it's going to come down to quarterback play, what these guys do up front, how they protect the quarterback, how we're able to run the ball, how we're able to be balanced. And that'll take some of that pressure off of 4. And we don't have to have as many dropbacks and opportunities to have people around him.
Looking at a big picture here, you're a 4th-round draft pick out of Towson, not a huge football school. When do you feel like you kind of settled in at the NFL level and felt comfortable?
I mean, my first year was a shock, but you just got to keep pounding. You got to keep chipping away and working that technique and trying to be your best self. Second year, I felt good about my growth and my development. But I'm fortunate that I didn't have to go out there too early. But my third year, I was ready to go. Like, I felt like I was at the weight that I needed to be. My technique was better. I mean, although, I had my bumps and bruises, and my third year was my roughest year, but it was the year that really kind of molded me and helped my career. And it was a good stepping stone for me to figure out, okay, like, I have these issues that I need to work on. Like, so I think as being a professional, you have to gauge every year about what you're doing good, what you're doing bad, and in that off season, you have to try to fix it. Mm-hmm. However, you have to try to fix it. And I think for guys like Landon Young, for Trevor Penning, like, this is the time where you have to start showing that you can be a key contributor to this team. I always lean and talk about, the big guys up front, because that's really the heartbeat of your team at the end of the day. And you want to see us have depth. You want to see us have guys who you can tell who have grown, right? And I think that's the most important thing, especially for those guys up front, but just for the young guys in general. What steps are you taking? Are you being more and more reliable, and are you understanding the game and being, becoming the pro that you need to be.
I love listening to an offensive lineman because you favor the line on that side of the trenches. But you talk to Cam Jordan, he doesn't like offensive linemen.
He's not supposed to, because we try to put these hands on him, and that's why he's been so damn good his whole career, is because he's so violent with his hands. And at the end of the day, offensively or defensively, it starts with these guys up front. And I'm excited about some of the pieces, right? You see Chase Young, you see him go from just doing, I'm just speaking this week, you see him go from three reps during team to about, I don't know, maybe 8 or so yesterday, and then he was out there versus the ones and some of the twos today. So I've watched this guy on tape when I had the honor of being a scout here for this team. I had a chance to grade him. He's explosive, man. He's big, and then having a chance to come out here and be right beside him, stand right beside him, he's taller than me, I'll say that. And this is just a kid that really, he's a player that really looks the part, long arms, explosive. So, if we can get him back to what he was looking like a couple years back, and that takes some of the pressure off Cam, it takes some of the pressure off these guys in the middle, and we can start to generate the pressure with these guys up front. And we don't have to lean on these linebackers, and so I'm excited to see how that comes together. There is some question marks in a few different positions here, but if we can solidify those two, the offense, defensive line, get some good depth, get off the ball, create a new line of scrimmage, then I think our playmakers can make plays.
I talked to Taliese Fuaga yesterday, and he said he's looking forward to going up against somebody else, not his own teammates, because that's when you can get a little more nasty.
Well, listen, it's that time is coming. That time is coming. But at this point in camp, you're going to see the same faces, you're going to hit the same shoulder pads, you're going to hit the same body types right now. But I get it. After 2-3 weeks, it comes to a point where you're like, all right, I'm tired of hitting Chase Young at 285. I want to go hit somebody else and kind of, see where I am against different technique, But the good thing about this group, offensively, defensive-wise, you got all different body types. I like this Christian Boyd in the middle. He's strong, powerful, plays with good leverage. So I'm excited to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, I am too. It's been fun so far. They will have those joint practices against the 49ers coming up in the next couple weeks and some preseason games, so we will see them against somebody else soon. But thank you so much for some of the insight for us today.
For sure, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate Jermon jumping on, giving us that insight. Great stuff from somebody who definitely excelled on the line, especially in that left tackle position, and then did get thrown in to having to make some position changes later on in his career. The Saints do have a day off tomorrow on Thursday, so we will not have a podcast then, but we will be back on Friday. Friday starts another round of practices. There will be 4 straight days, 2 pads, shells, and then another padded practice before the next day off comes on Tuesday. So we will have a ton more content coming at you after the day off tomorrow. As always, you can find it on NewOrleansSaints.com. You can tune in back home to your view at 11 a.m. Central for our live show with Todd Graffinini and I, and then John DeShazer will join us on the show on Friday. So a lot of good stuff to look forward to this weekend. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you again Friday.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.